Cable Music Channel.
You're watching G4.
This is NET.
This is the Satellite News Channel. All news, all the time.
Let's go back once again to the 1980s during the Wild West days of cable television. Back then, everyone wanted to throw their hat in the ring and get a piece of that cable ad revenue. One of these attempts will come in the form of Satellite News Channel, or SNC for short. This was a 24-hour news channel that would be one of the first competitors to CNN, which had launched only 2 years prior. The network was a joint venture between ABC and Group W and was headquartered in Stamford, Connecticut, probably across the street from the WWF. Unlike CNN, rather than presenting the news in a more formal and serious manner, SNC took a different approach and presented the news in a rotational newscast format that changed every 18 minutes. This innovative format covered the top 3 news 3 times an hour, with the remaining 12 minutes of each 30-minute cycle dedicated to local news, where it would cut away to one of the network's select regional stations. This unique format, which was quite ahead of its time, would shape the network's identity, where they would even incorporate the motto, "Give us 18 minutes and we'll give you the world." SNC wasn't running a slop shop either. The network was equipped with millions of dollars of high-tech equipment and was praised for its production and presentation. However, Ted Turner didn't take the idea of competition lightly and wasn't going to allow anyone to mess with his prize CNN, and unfortunately for SNC, it would be an uphill battle. Before they would even launch, Ted Turner would launch another 24-hour news channel, CNN 2. What inspired you to build another CNN right alongside the original?
Money!
Despite SNC's valiant efforts, including coverage of significant events such as the Washington Monument standoff and the 1982 primary election, the network's financial situation made it difficult to continue operations. After just a year, SNC had lost an estimated $40 million, which is about $130 million today when adjusted for inflation. This financial strain, coupled with the fierce competition and limited channel space of the time, would lead to SNC's ultimate demise. During this age of cable, it was a cutthroat competition, and unfortunately, SNC had the short end of the stick. During its final broadcast, SNC would present the news in its traditional format, with its staff celebrating in the background. Despite the cheering and the feel-good moments, it still felt kind of somber because at the end of the day, they're losing their jobs.
I'm Deborah Stone saying goodbye. I've actually been nervous for these few minutes after having done 1,000 hours or so on SNC. Thank you all for watching. It's been a joy.
Just as they wrapped up the news, they gave a final look back on the last 16 months of air until it was cued to the credits of everyone involved. SNC would cease operations on October 27, 1983, and Turner soon purchased the channel space to expand CNN 2, which had renamed itself as Headline News. The story of Satellite News Channel is similar to that of Cable Music Channel. They both tried to take on an established network but never had the fighting chance. Well, at least SNC lasted longer.
City dwellers have learned to cope with the problem of dog droppings, but it took a Cincinnati judge to rule that even peacocks are subject to pooper-scooper laws. Oh, goodness. Sorry. I can't finish the story.
Almost. Maybe. Perfect.
In the previous episode of Discontinued Nostalgia, I briefly mentioned upon G4 and how they were set to rebrand themselves as the Esquire Network. However, by the time that was set to happen in 2012, G4 had been dropped by several cable providers due to its low viewership. So, in order for the new network to reach the maximum amount of eyeballs, it would later be decided that the Style Network would take the mantle of being the Esquire Network. While that sounds pretty trivial and not that big a deal, that decision might have been the reason why Esquire failed in the first place. To give a quick understanding, we should probably talk about its predecessor. Esquire Network was initially launched as a Style Network on October 1st, 1998 as a spin-off to the E! Network. The channel focused on fashion design, urban lifestyle, and fashion shows. By 2003, it had shifted towards makeover shows, both visually and tangibly. New shows like Clean House, a home makeover show, and How Do I Look, a show where people get a complete overhaul in their looks, would be the channel's flagship programs for the network, lasting 10 and 8 seasons respectively. Later in that decade, and Style will go the way of most TV networks by introducing reality-based programming. Gee, I wonder what was the cause of this. New shows like Jerseylicious and Tia and Tamara would be the face of the network, along with a few other shows that would last 1 or 2 seasons. Guys, I gotta be honest with you, I was like 9 when this stuff was on TV, alright? I was like too busy watching The Sponge, so sorry if I'm not familiar with the love triangle between Tracy, Olivia, and Lorenzo, but I'll give you my thoughts once I finish season 3. Things would continue to look good for Style Network when in 2012 they would have a complete rebrand with a new logo and graphics. Surprisingly, this would be short-lived when in a last-minute decision it would be decided that rather than G4, the Style Network would rebrand as the Esquire Network. The Esquire name is based off the men's magazine, which has been in publication since 1933 and discusses men's lifestyle. The rebrand was scheduled to take place on September 23, 2013 to coincide with the magazine's 80th anniversary. This announcement would come as a shock to both fans and cable providers alike. Of course, many fans were enraged by this because Style was already a channel geared towards women, and the complete switch up to men's content didn't sit right with most viewers. To make things sound worse, this move would also result in an office shakeup. People who work within Style, many of whom were women, were either laid off or reshuffled elsewhere within NBC Universal. While an exact number wasn't disclosed, some sources believe it might have been nearly 100. Basically, Style shutting down on a 2-week notice was just not the best look. This new shift in programming also meant the cancellation of several Style Network shows, with the remaining shows moving to other NBC networks. When the network finally launched, its lineup was a bit of a mess since the rebrand was on short notice. A lot of Style's scheduled programming like Sex and the City and Clean House was still on the new network until December 2013. Perhaps this was like for contract obligations. Regardless, it wasn't the best first impression for the channel. Not only that, but they would also miss out on premiere episodes of American Ninja Warrior Season 5, as NBC didn't want to wait for the network to launch. Despite this messy start, Esquire had its own batch of original programming, including Friday Night Tykes, The Getaway, Knife Fight, and Brewdogs. While some people did enjoy Friday Night Tykes, a show that followed the lives of youth football athletes, the other shows were often criticized for being copycats of other shows on different networks, or YouTube for that matter. Remember, this was like 2013-2014, we weren't that far off from Hot Ones premiering on YouTube. Other shows to fill the time slot would be mainly NBC and USA Network reruns. Just speaking for myself, as solid as the lineup was, the channel's massive shift from female to male programming didn't do any favors to its already established viewership, and ratings would tank as a result. According to The Hollywood Reporter, just 4 months after launch, Esquire's audience in January was 36% lower in total day viewership and 43% lower in prime time than that of Style a year earlier. NBC Universal would give it one last hurrah by making a spin-off of American Ninja Warrior dubbed Team Ninja Warrior. While it did great numbers for Esquire, it wasn't one of the most watched shows on TV, getting less than 300,000 viewers per episode. When the show was moved to the USA Network for Season 2, it actually did 3 times better than it did on Esquire, with the Season 2 finale getting over 1 million viewers. By 2016, Esquire was essentially another rerun channel like G4, and soon cable providers would begin dropping the channel. Because of that, viewership would drop fast. In January of 2017, it was announced that Esquire Network would be ceasing operations by the end of the summer and become an all-digital service, whatever that means. Adam Stotsky, president of Esquire Network, states that this move was done mainly due to the fact that men today consume content on a variety of platforms, and that it was essential that they follow those viewers. As you expected, this was 2017. Streaming had already become a huge player, and major cable channels were already starting to lose viewers in droves, and startup channels like Esquire, along with other smaller networks, would find it hard to be profitable and eventually close down. Esquire would shut down on June 28th, with its final programming being an episode of Friday Night Tykes until cutting away to a thank you message. As for the future streaming platform, Esquire would announced 2 new projects, a true crime series named Edge Hill, which explores the murder of a Yale undergrad, and Borderland USA, a show that follows an elite group of border control. Gee, I wonder what that would have been like.
Get those kids out of here! You get out of here! You go back to Mexico, and you tell your Mexican friends, you tell your Mexican family that they better stay in Mexico. You tell everybody south of the border, they better stay south of the border.
Guys, who needs a wall when we got JBL? Unfortunately, neither show would be produced, and the digital platform would never come to fruition. Kinda crazy to think that NBC inadvertently killed 3 networks. I mean, they just basically killed a network that had an established audience. So all I can say to that is, I'm sorry, women.
Check out the new Las Vegas show with Bill Dano tonight at 11 on the all-new United Network.
Imagine gambling your generational wealth to start a TV network on a nationwide level, only to have it fail in under a month and eventually destroy your business empire. That's basically what this dude did with the iconic, not so iconic United Network, more commonly known during pre-launch as the Overmyer Network. This short-lived network was founded by Toledo businessman Daniel H. Overmyer. Before getting his foot into the TV business, he managed a chain of warehouses that expanded to hundreds of buildings in over 55 cities, where he is often credited for being the creator of the modern-day warehouse and is even dubbed the King of Warehouses. He also owned a local Toledo newspaper and had part ownership in a leasing company, as well as 80% of the Progress National Bank, so clearly this dude had a lot of money. Following the demise of the Dumont Network in 1956, many entrepreneurs saw an opportunity to become the new 4th network. While some tried and failed, others never got off the ground. But Overmyer seemed determined to take on this new venture and would go above and beyond compared to the rest. Honestly, if he played his cards right, we would probably talk about him the same way we would talk about other pioneers in TV history. Overmyer would take his first step into programming when in 1963, he applied for a license to build a TV station in his hometown, as at the time there were only two stations, CBS Channel 11 and ABC Channel 13, with NBC programming in between the two. While other candidates soon dropped out, Overmyer persisted and was granted the construction permit to build the TV station in March of 1965. During this time, he also acquired permits from other TV stations throughout the nation, including Atlanta's WATL, Cincinnati's WXIX, and San Francisco's KBAY, which he would later rename the networks to the initials of his family members. Just a year later, the new WDHO TV station would begin broadcasting, and rather than it becoming an NBC affiliate, the network would operate independently. The reason for this decision was because of bigger plans he had for the station. Just 2 months later, Overmyer would break the news that a new fourth network would be launching to take on CBS, NBC, and ABC, the Overmyer Network, with Oliver Treyz as the head of the network. Treyz, who was the former president of ABC from 1958 to 1962, was experiencing a downward slump in his career. Before he was appointed to run the Overmyer Network, he was forced to step down from his position at ABC due to the controversial graphic content from an episode of the 1961 TV show, Bus Stop, titled A Lion Walks Among Us. Yes, shut up. The episode was controversial for its graphic content, featuring a runaway fugitive who murders people nonchalantly who get in his way. While such content might seem typical by today's TV standards, just look at The Boys, the limited selection of programs at the time made it easy for this episode to become public enemy number one. Sponsors and viewers would complain of its depiction, where it would lead to a congressional hearing by the FCC. This whole controversy put ABC in a negative light and would result in Treyz stepping down, so perhaps he saw this opportunity of running the ON as a way to make a comeback in his career. Overmyer Network promised a unique schedule for each night, where it would broadcast a different type of theme, from a comedy night to a game show night to even a drama night. While no specific shows for those themes were announced, Overmyer announced plans for a flagship late-night talk show, The Las Vegas Show. This show was hosted by Bill Dana, who was best known for a stereotypical character named Jose Jimenez on The Ed Sullivan Show.
But just exactly what do you teach Santa Claus to say?
Well, first I teach Santa Claus to laugh.
You teach him to laugh?
Yes, I teach him to say, ho, ho, ho.
That's racist, man. Yeah, that's just straight ignorant, dog.
Bill Dana later in life would kill off the character due to its sensibility, so I guess we can let it pass. Other planned shows included regional games from the short-lived Continental Football League, an animated Bible show titled Tales from the Great Book, and news programming presented by United Press International. The vision for the network was to broadcast for at least 8 hours a day, but we'll get to that later. At first, everything seemed to be going well. Overmyer claimed that 35 stations had signed on to become affiliates, but as the launch date approached, that number eventually grew to over 123 stations, including 24 from the largest cities. Just knowing what we know so far, I'm honestly surprised he managed to bullshit his way to the top. Perhaps since Overmyer was a self-made millionaire, they might have given him the benefit of the doubt that he knew what he was doing, but that might have not been the case. Unfortunately, things were only going to get worse from here. Just 2 months before launch, Overmyer would give up 80% of the network's ownership to a group of 14 investors, where they opt to change the name of Overmyer to the United Network. The reason for such a bold shift in leadership is due to the financial hardship Overmyer was facing, not just from the network but from the warehouse business. To add insult to injury, a brand new board of directors was established, with Overmyer being excluded from having any role, which must have changed the trajectory for where this network was going to go forward. Despite the massive changes and multiple delays, United Network would launch on May 1st, 1967. With only 2 hours of programming on an 8-hour schedule, oh my god. The only show to reach the public would be the Las Vegas Show. At first, the show performed well, even surpassing other late night shows like Johnny Carson and Joey Bishop, but this was probably out of curiosity and ratings would drop. Just 3 weeks after launch, the network would struggle with keeping itself on the air, mainly due to its affiliates having an erratic relationship with the network itself, often delaying the Las Vegas Show for other late night programs. Because of this neglect, the network was bleeding money fast. After just 30 days on the air, United Network would cut its losses and cease operations, where they would later declare Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 weeks later. The reason for the network shutting down was that it came at the wrong time. What I mean by that is that United launched at the end of the television season, which meant by this time most networks and advertisers had blown over their budget, and just launching a whole new network without funding for shows wasn't a good call. Not to mention, operating it was not cheap. AT&T's transmission lines costed them around $400,000 a month, which is nearly 10 times that amount today when adjusted for inflation. Additionally, advertisers weren't buying ad space on the new network either. The Las Vegas Show failed to sell out their advertising time slots and even had to resort to selling their slots at discounted rates. The board of directors were hopeful that they could revive the network within 2 months as a public affairs news channel. However, an Omaha newspaper from 1968 speculates that the United Network was let go as a tax write-off, a fate arguably arguably worse than death. While that was the end of the United Network, or Overmyer, whatever you call it, it wasn't over for Daniel Overmyer himself, as he would later face a lot of legal trouble, which would lead to the collapse of his entire TV empire. While the legal problems were not entirely related to the United Network, the bankruptcy definitely impacted his other ventures. Overmyer would be convicted of bankruptcy fraud and then some, where he would serve 6 months in custody. That's pretty much the Cliff Notes version of the verdict. The legal stuff is like far beyond my comprehension. I'm sure like a legal expert can better explain this than me. As for footage of the United Network, nothing has ever resurfaced. There are no station IDs, no Las Vegas show, nothing. Only print ads and a few snapshots of behind the scenes stuff appears to be the only surviving evidence of the channel's existence, so yeah, this is all lost media. Here we have Spike TV's Latino counterpart, Rey Network. I personally didn't watch the channel growing up, we just never had it, but I will say Rey was definitely a unique channel for its time, especially at this stage of cable history with the rise of tablets and streaming. But despite the odds, the people behind it would give it their all. Rey was launched in 2013 and was a joint venture between American filmmaker Robert Rodriguez, Univision, and Cox. That's COX if you're listening to this. The channel was created as part of a strategy by Comcast to distribute minority-owned networks in an effort to win government approval for its controlling stake in NBC Universal. These other channels would include Esquire TV, founded by Magic Johnson, and Revolt by Sean Diddy Combs. Wait, what? Rey Network would be known for their lineup of programming, which included cult classic kung fu flicks, horror films, sci-fi fantasy, and classic TV shows, and was meant to help tap into the minds of filmmakers and entrepreneurs of a young Latino audience. With the help of Univision, they were able to create high-budget original programs, which included Matador, From Dusk Till Dawn, and their most popular flagship series, Lucha Underground. By the way, if you're not a huge wrestling nerd and haven't heard of this, well, imagine Lucha Libre as a novella cranked up to 11. Like, honestly, it was a unique concept. They would also have a series called The Director's Chair where Robert Rodriguez would have in-depth conversations with filmmakers, and I'm talking heavy-tier goats like Quentin Tarantino, John Carpenter, and Guillermo del Toro. These are still on YouTube, so I would recommend checking these out if you haven't. Rey would continue to gain momentum throughout the years, and by early 2015, it would peak towards 40 million households. Unfortunately, not even Rey Network would be able to stop the cord-cutting trend, and throughout the next few years, they would bleed cable subscribers. Slowly, many of its flagship originals like Lucha Underground would come to an end, and as the subscribers continued to drop, cable providers would also follow suit. Things would continue to get worse when in November of 2020, Univision would sell its stake in Rey Network, leaving them without one of their most prominent investors. While Robert remained optimistic about being fully independent, this would be the beginning of the end for Rey, as just 1 month later, on December 9th, it would be announced that the network would be shutting down at the end of the year. When December 31st came around, its final broadcast would be an episode of Lucha Underground before cutting away to a black screen. Gee, you think being a network tailored towards filmmakers, you'd at least go off with a banger or something, you know? Perhaps they got the idea from The Sopranos. Similar to Esquire Network, Robert Rodriguez had ambitious plans to take Rey into the world of streaming, and they would relaunch on the Roku channel on August 17, 2021. However, while some websites claim that the service is still on the Roku channel, just doing a quick search on it shows no results. And as for their social media, they haven't been active as of March of 2023, so I think they quietly ceased operations entirely. Hey guys, post-production Lewis here. So apparently it seems that Rey Network now falls under the name Rey Rebel, and it's actually streaming on Fuso and Roku. I'm not really sure why they didn't even bother updating the website or telling its viewers, because I didn't even know this until now. So thanks a lot to my viewers who updated me on this. Looking back at it, Rey Network really reminded me of the Z channel and how it tried to be a hub geared towards filmmakers. It does suck that they ended up flopping, because it felt like they had the potential to become a major platform, but oh well. Before we continue guys, just want to give a quick shout out to my Patreons. You guys help pay for at least a week's worth of sandwiches, and I'm grateful for that. If you'd like to support me and the channel, you could always become a patron on Patreon. Anyways, shout out over, back to the video.
And we're back to the hub.
Alright everyone, here's a childhood favorite that many of you may remember, The Hub. While the channel that once hosted The Hub now exists as Discovery Family, its platform has evolved several times, with each era having its own unique spin on programming and overall presentation. To see how it all began, let's go back to 1985. Before Discovery fucked up the media landscape with its acquisition of Warner Brothers, it was basically a tiny company, and it started broadcasting with the launch of the Discovery Channel. Unlike today, its programming's main focus was educational content based on science, nature, and history. This type of programming would be popular amongst children and adults, and it would be the reason why they would step into kids entertainment, as well as dedicate a Sunday morning block to kids. It wasn't until 1996 when Discovery Communications announced a new strategy to expand its global reach by introducing 4 new networks: Discovery Travel and Living Network, Discovery Civilization Network, Discovery Science Network, and our main topic, Discovery Kids Channel. The reason to expand to an exclusive kids channel was because, according to the network's senior vice president of the time, Marjorie Kaplan, many children were watching Discovery Channel programs with their parents. As such, there was a gap in the market, and Discovery Kids would be the solution. Compared to what other channels were airing, Discovery Kids would develop shows focused on adventure, nature, and science-themed topics targeted at audiences ages 6 to 11. Oh, how we have failed today's youth. Now kids are just growing up with Skibidi Toilet. Among the early programs broadcast on Discovery Kids channel were the likes of Bonehead, Detectives of the Paleo World, The Adventures of Ark, and Mega Movie Magic, the latter of which taught kids about the special effects used in films, which actually sounds pretty awesome if I'm being honest. But up until 2000, the channel was only carried by a select few cable providers, so yeah, this channel didn't have as big a reach just yet. That would all change by 2001 when Discovery Kids channel dropped the channel portion of its name and began expanding in other parts of the world. Canada would soon get its own version in partnership with Chorus Entertainment, and kids in the UK would also get Discovery Kids along with another timeshare channel, Discovery Wings, a channel dedicated to documentaries about aircraft. Not gonna lie, that sounds a bit too niche a topic to start an entire channel on. It's like if I started a channel on myself. Wait. Later that year, Discovery would announce a partnership with NBC to air a 3-hour Saturday morning block titled Discovery Kids on NBC. This block originally aired programs taken from Discovery Kids, as well as programs taken from its sister channels like Animal Planet and the main Discovery Channel. They would also venture into animated programming and premiere shows like Kenny the Shark and Tuttenstein in 2003. Sadly, Discovery Kids on NBC would last until 2006 when Discovery declined to extend its partnership with NBC, where it would be replaced with Cubo in September that same year. Wanting to focus on the main kids channel, Discovery would produce new shows like Bindi the Jungle Girl, a nature documentary series starring the daughter of the late Steve Irwin, and Dino Sapiens, a show with the premise of what if dinosaurs were still alive and became more intelligent beings. Despite these shows being well received, the Discovery Kids brand had started to decline in popularity by the late 2000s. Soon, Discovery Kids would cease operations in certain parts of the world, which included Discovery Kids UK shutting down in 2007, along with Discovery Wings, as well as Discovery Kids Canada in 2009. Perhaps these channels had some insight on what was to come. On April 30th, 2009, it would be announced by Hasbro, yes, the toy company, that they had paid $300 million to form a 50-50 venture with Discovery Communications. Together, they would be relaunching Discovery Kids as the hub. Interestingly, under the terms of the agreement, it would be Discovery's job to handle advertising sales and distribution, while Hasbro would take charge of acquiring and producing programming. And rather than advertise their products straight up, the plan was to produce original programs based on franchises they own. These included My Little Pony, Transformers, and several board game brands like Sorry and Monopoly. Of course, there would be some controversy surrounding Hasbro's deal, particularly from the Campaign for a Commercial-Free Childhood, or the CCFC. Susan Lin, the campaign's founder, feared that the hub would be used as a constant infomercial. She would tell the LA Times that they would be monitoring the situation, adding on to say that the notion of a toy company owning a TV channel for the purpose of promoting their toys is an egregious practice. Despite the fighting words, Margaret Loesch, the newly appointed CEO of the hub, as well as former president of Marvel Entertainment, stated that the channel's goal was to be vibrant and diverse with its programming, and that it wouldn't be used for the sole purpose of promoting Hasbro products, claiming shows based on Hasbro toys and games would fill less than 20% of the schedule. Whether that's really true or not is up for debate. The hub would officially launch on October 10, 2010, 10-10-10, get it? And introduce its viewers to a whole new world that was created by Troika Design Group and built around an emblem named the Hubble, which allowed it to transform into anything to embody a catalyst of action and imagination. The final logo design was the result of a number of drafts, some of which used typography similar to Hasbro's logo. I can see why they had concern then. Going up against the likes of Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, and Disney Channel, the hub targeted a main demographic of children aged between 2 and 12 years old, a market they felt that was being neglected by other networks in favor of tween programming. programming. However, they would reserve the primetime programs for older kids ages 9 to 14, where it would include shows like Family Game Night, Pound Puppies, and My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, a show that has caused irreversible damage to civilization. I'm kidding. That show alone was one of the reasons the Hub became a household name. Before Bluey, there was My Little Pony, and it might not be for me, but I can see why a lot of people enjoyed it. Additional programs such as Dan Vs. and R.L. Stein's The Haunting Hour were supplied by The Hatchery, a production company co-founded by Margaret Loesch and part owned by American Greetings, which brought in the likes of Strawberry Shortcake's Berry Bitty Adventures and Care Bears, Welcome to Care-a-Lot, both of which were licensed by Hasbro. By the way, I've never watched The Hub because Cartoon Network was like the coolest thing at the time, but I do remember Dan Vs. out of all the shows. That one really felt out of place for how mature it was, but watching it now it kind of speaks to me. I understand you now. Apart from properties related to Hasbro, the programming lineup also included shows such as Sabrina, Secrets of a Teenage Witch, Secret Millionaires Club, and Shizao. Additionally, reruns of other acquired series like Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman were aired, along with a collection of Warner Brothers animated programs from the 90s such as Animaniacs and DC shows. Despite an influx of bronies, by June of 2011, viewership figures for the Hub were lower than anticipated. Although management still felt very positive and encouraged by the Hub's early day performance, it might seem that Discovery were starting to roll things back. In 2012, the Discovery Kids brand would be revived internationally and relaunched in India. Over time, new DK channels were launched in other parts of the world, including Australia, the Middle East, and North Africa. However, other than in India, most of these channels have already ceased operations. Back in America, needing to spruce things up, the Hub would rebrand and change its name to Hub Network in 2012. While that really doesn't sound like that big a change, this change marked the shift away from focusing primarily on children to focus more on family-based programs, which was emphasized by their new tagline, Making Family Fun. This move would be a precursor to what will happen later, as in 2014 it was announced that Margaret Loesch would be stepping down, which effectively marked the end for the Hub. Just a few months later, in September of 2014, reports from the Wall Street Journal stated that Discovery Communications would be acquiring a majority stake from Hasbro and would rebrand Hub Network as Discovery Family beginning October 13. The bigwigs at Discovery and Hasbro conceded that the increase in popularity of video-on-demand services such as Netflix had affected their viewership. Additionally, due to Hasbro's association with the channel, competitors like Mattel were reluctant to advertise on it. This petty relationship would hurt profits, and by 2014, Hub Network was only making $9 million per year, which may sound like a lot, but isn't enough for a TV network. The split would now be 60-40 in Discovery's favor, where the primetime time slot would be reserved for family-oriented programs managed by Discovery, whereas Hasbro would maintain the schedule during the day. This change now meant that shows like Transformers, Robots in Disguise, a show originally meant for the Hub, was now picked up by Cartoon Network, as it would better target the male audience there rather than Discovery Family. Discovery Family would feature a lot more original programming, many of which seem to be cake-based for some reason, including Cake Boss, Bake It Like Buddy, and My Dog's Crazy Animal Adventures. I don't even know what any of these are. They would also acquire cable rights to several series and specials from 41 Entertainment, like Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures and Super Monsters. My Little Pony would also receive a reboot following the conclusion of Friendship is Magic in the form of My Little Pony Pony Life in 2020. And yeah, that's sort of where we're at right now. Today, Discovery is now merged with Warner Brothers, which now means that Discovery Family and Cartoon Network are effectively like stepbrothers. As of 2024, Discovery Family is the least watched channel under the Warner Brothers Discovery umbrella and is ranked as the 132nd most watched broadcast or cable network in the United States according to Variety, and is available to approximately 28 million homes statewide, way down from its peak of 71 million households back in 2014. As for Hasbro, they still hold a 40% majority stake, which is due to run out in 2025, and it's unknown whether they'll continue this joint venture because as of recently, Cartoon Network shows like Summer Camp Island have started making their way onto the channel, so perhaps we're in the midst of a transitional period of something else. Who really knows? At least the toy company managed to make a decent profit. As for a channel that educates kids about science projects, well, that idea is basically dead. Cake Boss, anyone? Well everyone, that was episode 3 of Discontinued Nostalgia. I know I said I would move on to other discontinued topics, but a lot of you were asking me to do a third part on this, so, you gotta give the people what they want. Speaking of that, part 2 of the Nickelodeon history video, that should be the next video coming out. I know it's been a while, but it should be done pretty soon. I know I sound like a broken record, but what else do you want me to say? Anyways, I'm gonna have some cough drops. My throat has been killing me for the last 2 weeks. If you like this video, go hit the like and subscribe, and go check out the last 2 parts if you haven't. My name is Lewis, and I am out.